Okay, folks, so I think that's us ready to go. So, as ever, welcome to Tech20, our social showcase for speakers with technology ideas on 20 minutes or less. My name's Nikki Tierney. I'm the hub manager here at the OGTC, and I will be looking after you for the rest of the afternoon. So, as ever, we like to keep you safe. So, first and foremost, we have no fire drills planned for today. So, if you do hear the alarm, it is real, and you need to exit the building. If you're in this room when you hear it, your nearest fire exit is the back right, my right, of the room here. Exit through the fire exit, turn right up the stairs through the car park and turn right down Queen's Lane North, and our muster point is the rear car park of number 14 Queen's Road, which is signed as Bupa Dental Practice. If you find yourself out the front of the building, straight back out the door you came in, turn left, left down Queen's Road, left at number 14 and straight through to muster in the rear car park again. So we call these sessions Tech20 because we give you 3 20-minute blocks. You've had 20 minutes to have your lunch. You'll get to hear 20 minutes presentation and round about 20 minutes for Q&A. We do a hard stop at 1:30, and we do ask you to clear the room when we finish. Any networking conversations or so on, you're welcome to continue up at the front of the building on your way. And if, of course, you're enjoying yourself so much you want to share it, you can tweet us. We are at the OGTC. Or if you're on Instagram, please hashtag Tech20 with any photographs. So with no further ado, I'm going to introduce our speaker, Deborah, and our Innovation Network Director, Luca. So, Deborah, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. So, afternoon, everyone. I'm Deborah O'Neill, and I'm the Chief Exec of NovaBiotics, as you'll learn, a Aberdeen-based biotechnology business. So my background is a scientist. I'm an immunologist by training, but have been running the business since 2004, and I span it out.
And what are you going to talk to us about today?
I guess an intro about the sector, because a lot of you probably are not familiar with what's going on in the Northeast in life sciences, and especially on the biotechnology, the medical end of life sciences. And really just throw some things out, so hopefully the last 20 minutes will be fruitful and busy. Just the start of hopefully a new way of thinking between two very important sectors, life science and Northeast for life science and oil and gas, for the Northeast, and how we can maybe work together in the future. I think it's going to take a lot more than 20 minutes, but hopefully just to get things moving on that front.
Okay, and finally, Luca, can you tell us why it's of interest to us here at the OGTC?
Well, I think
it's your fault.
Deborah just explained it, but I think from a GTT perspective, what we try to do here is try to match industry challenges with technology solutions. And one way is starting from the problem and looking for a solution to the specific problem. But another way, which is part of the agenda today, is, let's learn about other sectors, other technologies that might not be so obviously translatable to the oil and gas sector. And in this environment, which is designed to free up the mind and encourage creativity, is there something we can learn? Is there some potential synergy there? What can we do together with the biotechnology sector? How can we use biotechnology to increase the efficiency of the oil and gas and change the way we work? But also, what are the potential connections? So this is more of a speculative research rather than specifically driven by a specific problem. And that's why I'm encouraged by the people here, because I know many of you are good thinker, innovative thinker, and so I'm no pressure, but I expect a good 20 minutes of discussion at the end of it.
Okay, thanks, Luca. And with that, Deborah, your 20 minutes start now.
Fantastic. So, question to you first of all. Who here is from the life science sector? I think I know the answer. Good. So I'm not preaching to the choir with a couple of the slides that I'll move on to. So I think the opening slide kind of speaks for itself. How can there be potentially more crosstalk between our two sectors, our two industries? A little bit about my business. We're a clinical stage biotechnology business. We develop new medicines for difficult to treat diseases, and specifically infection. We're privately held. Our headquarters are here, but we do have a US facility. What I mean by clinical stage, and we're not alone in Aberdeen, is that within our portfolio of therapy candidates, so things that are still being tested as new medicines, we've got some in clinical trials, or they've actually just come out of clinical trials, and some still at the earlier, what we call preclinical stage, so they've not been into people yet. Why are we doing it? Well, this. Unless you've all been living under a rock for the last few years, you will be aware of the massive issue of antimicrobial resistance. Those stats there are the numbers of people dying each year from infection that treatments cannot treat because of resistance at the moment. According to the O'Neill report, published a couple of years ago, no relation, 2 L's, it's going to get a lot worse. The economic impact will be huge. So back then, that was when that was $100 trillion, by the way, and 10 million deaths. So this is a massive problem. And that's part of the reason why we do what we do. But it's not just for the love of it. We're a business. We have to make money. Infection presents an $80 billion global market. It's huge, and it's very much unmet at the moment. What we do is take a medical problem, a medical challenge. In our case, it's infection. Other companies in the Northeast, it's Alzheimer's, it's inflammatory bowel disease. We come up with new ways to potentially solve that medical problem. We do the difficult stuff in the lab, so actually test potential new treatments. In some cases, we have companies also developing devices or diagnostics, generate the data. If it looks good, obviously we'll put that into clinical trials. We also then interact with pharma partners. So we are not interested in manufacturing and marketing our product. Our assets really are intellectual assets. We do the difficult bit of drug discovery or device or diagnostic discovery. Our partners are then responsible for the marketing and manufacture. But between us, the goal is licensed, marketed new drugs globally. So obviously medicine is a global problem. We're not just focused on local markets. So as I said, we're not interested in the easy bit, which is actually for at least chemically based drugs, making them and marketing them. But we do make our money from completing those licensing deals and securing pharma partners for them to go forward. And then we all benefit, us obviously, from sales royalties once the products that we've developed are successful. Probably also common things there, and they're not just sector specific to different sectors. Tech-based businesses, we're not really interested in this end, but it's monetizing the technology, the intellectual property around what we've developed, the difficult, and certainly in drug discovery, high value end. So what the heck is life science or biotechnology? It's a very, very broad church, but I guess for this talk, that biotechnology and life science is kind of interchangeable, because the bit of life science that we're very good at in the Northeast is biotechnology, so medical life sciences. However, industrial is certainly relevant. There is industrial biotechnology as well, to what I'll talk about, and maybe getting into the thinking of how the two sectors can work together. The definition of biotechnology, as per the biggest trade organization for biotechnology, which is the not very originally titled bio in the US, is simply this, that it's processes to improve life, really all based on biology, and no matter what the outcome is. I like the way that they mention food products such as bread and cheese. Actually, it was brewing, which is the purest form of biotechnology. So they've probably been a bit PC in skipping that. So again, clearly we're quite good at that in the Northeast. So that's industrial biotech. I think that the term biotechnology's got a little bit wobbly now, because a lot of the drug production of our chemical-based drugs doesn't have much to do with that pure definition. So I guess just think of biotechnology as anything to do with a biological process or something that will be used in medicine or healthcare. As I mentioned, we're very, very good at it in the Northeast. These are the 2014 stats, which I'm sure at some point we'll be updating and everything will have gone north. What we're particularly good at in NovaBiotics area, which is coming up with therapies, is taking them through to that later stage process, so getting them into clinical trials and on towards the market. So nearly a quarter of Scotland's biotech in that area is based here in the northeast, and Scotland punches above its weight globally anyway in this sector, so that means there's a lot going on. We're one of only 2 biologics hubs in the UK. Cambridge is the other one, and biologics, you probably heard in the press about drugs based on antibodies or new technologies that usually make the press because they're more expensive, but they're much more targeted treatments. It's the very clever end of very, I guess, non-traditional chemical-based processes to come up with new medicines that are based on biology, much less chemistry, and that is a strength and has been for a while here in Aberdeen. It's a sector that really impacts the economy, even though we're not huge employers. Again, all back to that intellectual capital that we generate. You probably didn't know this, but ARI is, again, because of the new hospitals, Europe's largest single-site health campus, because it has to have every specialty under one roof just because of the catchment area. So it's a very, very valuable tool if you're interested in doing clinical trials, etc. I will keep banging on about this. What we do in the northeast is the high value end of R&D, not just making easy chemical-based drugs. As I mentioned, there are 14 life science companies and counting at the moment. Between us, we've raised more than 200 million in investment over the last 5 years. We have a very strong academic base as well, essential, and I'll come on to the word cluster in the next few slides, for a strong cluster based on technology and innovation. And it's not just the University of Aberdeen and RGU. In the agri, probably not marine biotech space, we've got the James Hutton Institute, ex-Macaulay, for folks who didn't know. It's rebranded and twinned with the Crop Research Institute in Dundee. They've been very good at securing some big grants and are huge employers in the area. So it's something that we're very good at. Don't shout about it enough, so a lot of you are probably very unaware of a lot of these stats. This isn't a new thing, the two sectors coming together, specifically around energy. And this is what we call the white biotech space. So this is hardcore industrial biotech. I love the fact that, I mentioned our trade body in the US, their kind of strap line is heal the world, fuel the world, and feed the world. We're about to go to, I guess, their extreme speed dating event in Boston, because it's the 25th anniversary of this meeting in June, where the entire biotech sector will be, and folks that are focused on fueling and feeding the world will be there, as well as on our side in the medical space. So it's not new, the link between biotech and energy, at least. Just down the road in Glasgow, we've got the Industrial Biotechnology Innovation Centre, and there's a group of companies based there that are basically generating energy through biological processes, including the crazy cats at Celtic Renewables, who are powering cars on mash waste from whiskey distillation. Uh-huh.
Older guys that do the tours, that's what we used to have our wash stuff, we used to use it as fuel many, many years ago.
See?
And just give it fun, isn't it?
Well, it's interesting because, we are competing for food and fuel, so the mash waste can be used for either. I think Celtic, it can actually be used for both. I think they can process it and then send it back at some stage, and it can still be used as food. But yeah, they're making ethanol, methanol, biobutane, and biodiesel. Planes are flying on biofuels. Luca and I were talking about this before, though it's not really renewable. I think the first Qantas flight, and that's a little picture of mustard seeds, took 150 acres worth of mustard seeds to do a very, very, very short flight. So we'd have to deforest the entire planet. So nice, but why? Canada, no surprise. Even United Airlines, there you go, have eco skies. So this bit isn't new. How sustainable it is, I'm not sure, but at least it shows some out-the-box thinking, and it absolutely links the two sectors, but only in that white biotech space. I'm interested in adding another colour to this. Biotechnology is confusing, but I do like this new kind of colour coding. So you've got agri-biotech, and I mentioned the James Hutton, that's obviously green biotech. Marine, I didn't know that had been separated out, is blue biotech. What NovaBiotics does is red biotech, so in the healthcare space. Black biotech doesn't exist yet, so is this something that we could maybe think of pioneering in the Northeast? So, I mean, my initial thoughts on how we could come together, and this is, less about, I guess, products and more about process. Life science and oil and gas are two global industries, major mega industries, each worth just shy of about 2 trillion, I think, at the moment in terms of assets. Actually, life science is a bit bigger. Key to the Northeast economy, as well as the global economies. Life science has been around a little bit longer, locally since the 1490s, and the medical school started at King's College. Each sector produces very high value, if not ultra high value, essential end products. What we do is essential to keep the planet and people going. Life science, biotechnology, very much innovation led. This is becoming more and more important to the oil and gas sector. So less about necessarily your end product, but what that technology, the bit that you can protect, even maybe the process and that intellectual capital. So it's obviously becoming more important to both sectors. There's always a constant need to improve, expand, and secure our positions. We never ever, we are running to stand still. And, just some things I thought in terms of, again, those are common challenges and issues, and, potentially the things that constantly drive both sectors as well. We're all after not necessarily just faster discovery of assets, but more targeted as well. So a cleverer approach to doing what we do, not just throwing money at things. And I mean, that's why pharma failed, just buying lots of really nice equipment, crossing their fingers and hoping something popped off the end of the line. It didn't. So biotech now does that complicated bit, and pharma's brilliant at running big clinical trials, marketing and selling drugs. And in both cases, all of the easy ones have been discovered. The patent cliff for our industry happened in 2010, 2011, because genuinely all of the easy drugs based on chemistry were discovered up until the 80s. You guys have a problem with the assets are there, it's getting them out now in a much more efficient, cleverer way. Quality of the products that we're generating, the technology we use to do that, and safety, always an issue. And I guess, back to this thing of the intellectual capital, optimizing how we exploit that. Doesn't matter if you're not even going to sell anything, it's how you protect that and monetize your concept, your idea, what you have that's new. Leaner and more cost-effective research and development processes, and the same with actually producing what you've researched and developed. And for our industry at the pharma end, things like continuous manufacturing are now coming into play, and that's changing, and it is all about efficiency and generating your end product. A couple of things I thought about in terms of the future for both sectors, new areas for us both. Big data. Luca and I have spoken about this before. Yeah, we can all collect it, but what do we do with it? How do we actually best use it? That's a key thing. to the northeast and something that's linked with the digital economy push. You know, for our sector, we've got fantastic things now, like smart drugs, packaging, wearable devices that are constantly feeding data back, probably too much data, not best sure how to use it. Haven't put it there, but blockchain, that's coming as well, and that's going to be incredibly important for our sector. And I am sure with oil and gas and the energy sector overall as well. Artificial intelligence, you know, which processes that both sectors use can be improved by the implementation of this. You know, it's coming into play in both. And I mentioned real-time and continuous manufacturing of drugs in our sector. That's now linked with artificial learning, so there's continuous improvement of a process. So literally the active ingredients of a drug might be going in at one end, and that's being fixed real time if there are problems that pop up. So it's amazing, and a lot of that is now AI driven. So, you know, in some ways both sectors are heading towards new territory. So at least in the northeast, where we can, why not let's take some of those journeys together if that's going to be more mutually beneficial. And just some top of my head asks, and hopefully we'll have a full 20 minutes to discuss this. But if you look at white biotech, it's very much been one way. So biotech helping, and I'll come on to some specifics, helping the energy sector. It's a two-way street here. So top of my head, in terms of the things that my sector could ask oil and gas, do you have anything useful that we could pinch in terms of chemistry, materials that we don't know about yet that could go into not just drugs, but the materials that we use to make devices or diagnostics? You know, there's an interesting case of the Longitude Prize, which is supposed to be coming up with a mains power independent diagnostic for infection. And it is such a tough ask in terms of, you know, this has to go into some pretty challenging climates and be able to very sensitively detect infection and its resistance profile. It's that kind of big thinking problem where I think we need help from folks who've got some fantastic ideas actually about energy and energy sources and better materials. So loads and loads of examples. So anything we can pinch in that regard. Back to process, you know, looking at what we do in terms of developing drugs, devices, diagnostics, how we store things, how we distribute, you know, their learnings there that we could benefit from. Virtual and remote working, big thing in oil and gas. We've got very hazardous conditions where we need to work as well. First time I ever experienced virtual reality was actually in this very room. I went onto an oil rig. It's brilliant. We've got labs where people probably shouldn't be working. So, you know, you're all aware of the Ebola outbreak and the issues there, not just with having to treat patients and not being able to do that remotely, but even in category 4 labs, and there are only 5 or 6 in the world where you can actually use pathogens such as Ebola. You'd much rather be able to do that outside somewhere, but remote working is, you know, isn't something that we're familiar with. And then I was listening to a talk at an AMR event a couple of weeks ago. Somebody who is mining for interesting microbes in the Arctic and the Antarctic out at sea, and these are saltwater dependent bacteria that are producing a lot of useful biological compounds. They could be anti-infectives, they could be anti-cancer drugs. You have to screen them, but again, who knows what's being thrown out in the waste that's produced off sea that, you know, we could maybe be working with groups that look into these things. So those are just top of my head asks, and, you know, coming from a less familiar place here, but, you know, even thinking asks of the oil and gas sector to the life science and biotechnology sector in the northeast. You know, I think one thing we certainly can share is back to this concept of we are very good at protecting technology, and developing intellectual capital from what we do and letting somebody else take the pain of manufacturing and marketing that. Sustainability and enhancing processes, production, quality, and the yield of what's produced by the oil and gas sector, and using anything from enzymes, microbiology, back down to it could be chemistry, biochemistry, microbiology, or something that we could plug into certain processes to improve them. I know in the past, in terms of infrastructure, improvements and improving yield, there was a project looking at some downhole leak blocking that worked in a similar way as platelets do in the blood. That was all probably a little bit too new at the time, but looking back at things like that and some new things, not that you would know anything about it, but so right, I'll be talking to you later then. So we need more of that, and not just for now, but could a lot of this even help with decommissioning challenges, especially around maybe environmental protection, pollution, etc. So I don't think we've even scratched the surface here, but just to throw it out there and have folks coming up with other possibly non-perfect projects that we could possibly do together as well. And a bigger thing, we are going to have to learn to work together as a proper cluster soon. The sector is going to have a biohub on the hospital site, and it's spaces, facilities, events like this, and how we can learn from you guys who've been doing it for a long time, how we can benefit from that. And to finish on, this is it. Can we set the challenge? Today isn't even about that, but just asking the question, can we set the challenge of both sectors working together in the future? I think there are genuine areas of overlap and commonality. And can we pioneer this concept of black biotech? So focusing on oil and gas and medical life science, so biotech and that red biotech space, so energy and medical. Did we miss out on the white biotech space, or can we pick off where a lot of people left off? I'm not sure why the Central Belt dominates, where we've got the three sectors that are involved in this. Can we improve on that? Is it worth us getting into that space? I think importantly, we need to go beyond what's been done before and back to that kind of one-way street of just white biotech supporting oil and gas. Even this happened back in 2015. I didn't know about this, but iBioAC, working with the Oil and Gas Innovation Centre, nothing, as far as I can see, ever came from this, which seems to be such a shame. But it's really interesting looking at the kind of key bullets of what this event was supposed to address. So I think there's still space probably to go back here, but I think the USP of the Northeast could be more focusing on what we do and medical biotech, but never say never to all of this. So two big questions then are, how do we do that if people think we can take on that challenge, and what would the next steps be? And with that, I think somebody cheated. I'm sure I went slightly over, but hopefully 20 busy minutes of questions now.
Not at all. So first of all, can you show your thanks for Deborah, please? Okay, we're just going to open up for Q&A now. If you do have a question, if you just pop your hand in there and Lauren will find you with the microphone. And if I can just ask you to wait for the mic before you speak, because we're recording. Helps pick it up. Let's go.
Thank you very much for that. Initially, I was thinking, how is this going to join up? But then there was a bit when I first came in and I met you, and we talked about plastic forks. Yes. And I think there's a danger that we all go, oh, plastic forks, there's something wrong with plastic forks. And of course, that comes from oil and gas and things. But maybe what's wrong is we don't have someone that will break it down properly. Mm-hmm. And initially also looking at these planes, and you gave the example of biofuels and where that all comes from, that we maybe potentially have a danger of going, let's rape the planet of all the natural resources in order to make wooden forks, if you like. So where are we maybe with regards to oil and gas and the burning of fossil fuels in order that they may be more environmentally friendly? Because if we can get into that space, then there might be more investment in order to be able to find more difficult oil and new technology in that way.
Absolutely. So, again, I spent a lot of time looking to see, even is there anyone doing this? And there are a few companies. So there's a couple of Canadian, I suppose they are biotech companies focused on just that, and more from, I guess, environmental remediation all around the oil and gas sector, and using, it's generally microbiology, I have to say. Bacteria are pretty clever to enhance processes, to do some cleanup, actually even break down certain waste products much easier than plastic, and enzymes as well. So good old biochemistry, and using biology in that respect to, again, improve processes, clean things up, whether it improves yield because you've got cleaner pipes, or again, it's back to environmental remediation. So there's a heck of a lot that can be done, and that hasn't been explored fully. So again, that might be a USP that, the Northeast could really focus on. And it does bring the two sectors together for sure.
Thank you. This gentleman in the front.
Going back to the point about biofuels.
Yeah.
I came across Celtic Renewables about a year ago, and I've been in some conversations with them.
Mm-hmm.
And what the guy sort of said, it was like most of the cost of transporting fuel is actually getting it to its market. So we've got loads of whiskey distilleries. Why have we not got biofuel plants there? So we're using them for farming and industry.
Exactly. And rather than thinking of it, as sort of massive energy plants, almost on a local basis, so you haven't got that distance, and you can almost a DIY biofuels. That's interesting, I guess.
So we should really all drink more whiskey. It's okay.
Well, you have to have the product to start with. So yeah.
We've got a question here.
Thank you, Deborah, for a great presentation. I have a question around your approach in your industry for innovation. So in oil and gas, innovation through technology advancement is paramount, but often we see the industry being slower to react. And when you see other sectors talking about fail fast in shorter cycles of innovation, oil and gas, primarily with safety requirements, are perhaps more conservative to adopt some disruptive technologies, as some of them you've mentioned. But you also come from an industry that is very safety conscious as well. So I'd like to see, what is your approach? Have you seen as any interesting ideas around adopting innovation, especially about the fail fast cycles?
Yeah, that's a great question. Even since I started NovaBiotics in 2004, the industry has moved very much to fail fast. And I think it's probably patent lifespan. So everything that we generate essentially has this 20-year shelf life, and the clock's ticking all the time. So it's all about seeing whether that's going to be a winner or not very quickly. And I guess that's separated from a very risk-conscious sector in terms of how we operate, but probably less risk-averse when it comes to testing things out and having to take those chances that oil and gas probably doesn't, just because of that clock ticking with patents, and having to make decisions much more quickly, so you can then decide, well, I might get, because you'll probably have 10 years, if you're lucky, of on-patent sales. So it's never going to be finite. Somebody will come in and start selling the same thing as a generic product, and you lose 70% of your market share the day that your patent expires. So I think that probably drives the willingness to adopt innovation and technology. And I guess from our side, who are selling that innovation, to absolutely protect that as much as we can as our only asset.
And here.
Two different questions. So one of them, you take a process, you write a patent, you go to license it. In the space we're in, if we try to do that, we tend to get the challenge where when we bring a technology to market, the market try to build it instead of licensing it. So the first question would be whether or not you find that as an issue in your sector or not. The second one is actually what you were talking about reminded me a lot of, I'm a software guy, so I'm going to be way out of my scope here. So please excuse me for treading on things in the wrong way. But one of the problems we got involved in was corrosion, and it was a lot to do with sulfate-reducing bacteria, which shocked me that bacteria can go down, live in rock, and come back up and create H2S, which is a big problem for the biggest asset in the North Sea, Buzzard, because they have a lot of sour crude. And it seems that perhaps the opportunity of making that a solution rather than a problem, in terms of the bio solving it rather than creating it, would be a really cool thing. So that was the two things. One of them, patents and licensing. The other one, opportunity.
Yeah, so working back from, I guess, the question of bugs in pipes, absolutely. So on the one hand, you want to kill them, and our sector could probably come up with means to do that in a more environmentally friendly way than putting the stuff down that's used currently. But yes, you only need one, and they grow very, very quickly. At least getting those out as well and saying, you know, is there something interesting in there? Is there something that bug? There are particular families of bacteria traditionally associated with either the discovery of antibiotics in them, because, you know, it's a bonkers concept. The drugs that we use to treat most infections actually come from bacteria, because they're using them in this billion-year-long microbe war to kill other bacteria, and we've just kind of hijacked that. But they make a whole bunch of other things. Where people are looking at the moment, it's literally at the same levels that oil and gas are drilling. So it's absolutely what is on the infrastructure and causing problems, but even as you're drilling, is there anything there that we could have a look at in sediment that could generate a whole new class of, you know, any different compound? On the patents, that's a great question. We don't tell anybody about anything until we've patented it, and then we sue them if they go and build it, because they'll be infringing. So it's a strange sector in that most of what we talk about has to be non-confidential for a very long time. Yeah. And you wind potential acquirers or licensees up on the basis of some very high-level data, get them under CDA, and then you can talk about it. But otherwise, yeah, that's another reason that we have to patent everything, just to protect it and to stop a bigger player coming in. Yeah. That said, the way the industry's moved, the bigger players probably wouldn't try and do that. And there's now this symbiosis where they wouldn't even try and replicate what the biotech end does, and are quite happy to say, we're not very good at that, or as good as you. We'll let you generate those ideas, and we'll screen them. And if they're good, we'll take them on, but not generally try to replicate. So I'm not saying everybody's a good guy in our sector, but it sounds like they might be a little bit nicer.
Good, thanks.
Okay, next question, please. Hamish.
It won't be boring.
A bit formal. Your industry is beset by regulation, as is the oil and gas, probably to a lesser extent. How do you see a collaboration? Who's going to be the deciding body in bringing anything forward or getting accreditations through?
Oh, that is a really good question. I think it would depend, Hamish, on which way things are going. So it would be our regulators, I guess, if there was anything useful that came from oil and gas, and whether that went into a device, a diagnostic, or a drug. And I think provided that was obviously being generated through a process that fits your industry's regulators, it will be down to the people that at the end of the day make the decision on medical products, and vice versa. If, you know, biotech try to implement anything in the oil and gas sector, it would have to be down to their regulators. I would say, and you're absolutely right, that's another common thing, we're two very, very highly regulated sectors. At an event a few weeks ago where we had the US consulate over, it was interesting that the message was there's an issue with global regulation of, and this really surprised me, of oil and gas that doesn't exist in our sector. And it's bonkers because both are global and you'd think that there was some parity, but the point there was one of the issues and a barrier for operating in the US is how different regulation is there for energy versus the UK. We have an office in the US just because you need one to engage with the FDA. In our sector, it doesn't matter where you're actually inventing or dealing with things. It's all down at the end of the day to each country to decide whether that product or service can be implemented, but it's very much a level playing field. So different challenges in terms of regulation, but I think it depends on who takes the innovation forward and whether that becomes an oil and gas one or a biotechnology innovation.
Okay, we've got time for one more question. This gentleman got there.
Thank you. Thanks, Deborah. Very, very interesting. I just wanted to know, so we talk about life sciences and oil and gas today. When you think about other surprising and interesting insights that perhaps life sciences has learned from some other industry, what in your experience has been the most interesting or innovative, I guess, cross-learning? And then moving on from that, where else would you recommend oil and gas goes to have a look, given what you know about it?
Ooh. So to the first one, I mentioned things like wearable devices and big data. So probably what life science and biotech has learned from the tech industry. So actual kind of communication, real time of biological data and parameters is so important, whether that's clinical trials or anyone that's had to even be monitored for 24 hours for blood pressure and things like that. So we've learned from tech for sure. In terms of, so would you mean another sector that oil and gas could look to? Again, tech. Or anywhere, clearly life science would be the best place, but I'm sure, our two sectors aren't alone in just not speaking with each other enough. So, yeah, it's probably, where do you start?
Okay, thank you. And just before we finish up, I'm just going to ask Luca if he's got any sort of closing words he would like to share.
I would just like to thank you, Deborah, for a very fascinating overview and some thought-provoking questions. My reflection is that there are two elements of technology. One is the supporting technology, so the technology that supports our core business. So the artificial intelligence, big data, mobile, those are potential areas where both the life science or biotech sector and the oil and gas sector can find different application, but have some part of the journey in common to develop and to take to the next level.
Yeah.
But that's a fascinating part of the core technology. In the end, oil and gas is organic material down there. There's a lot of bacteria as well that may be there for billions of years. And so that could be an interesting point of what is there for the life science to take from the organic of the oil and gas industry, and what is there for the oil and gas industry to take from the application of bacteria to leak, to corrosion, or to the chemistry of oil and gas, in addition to the engineering that we tend to be more accustomed to. I don't know where this is going, but this is a black biotech, so from black magic almost kind of thing. That sounds fascinating as a starting point. I think this could be a starting point for a journey together. And I look forward to engage more with the biotech sector in taking our challenges, the oil and gas technology challenges, and maybe translating them in a language which is less oil and gas and more science, to help the biotech sector come up with some potential ideas and contribution. And the other way around, of course. So that's it. Thank you very much again. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you.